Welcome to the Lincoln Journal-Star editorial board endorsement interview with Congressman Mike Flood, who is running for Congress in the 1st District, a Republican. Mike, thank you so much for being here with us. In a moment, you're going to be, as I said, the star. We'll introduce the supporting cast briefly first. Natalia.
Hi, I am Natalia Witta. I'm the president of the Journal-Star.
Kent.
And I'm Kent Walgamot. I write about arts and entertainment, and I've been on the editorial board for a little over a decade now. So,
all right. Well, with that, we will just launch into this. You've got some practice at being a congressman now, Mike. So the question is similar to what we asked in the spring, but why do you still want this office, and what experiences and attributes have you had, do you have, that will help you succeed in it?
Well, hey, first of all, thank you for the question. Good to see everybody on the Zoom call today. You know, I've been in public service since 2004 when I won my first election for the legislature representing Madison County, which includes the city of Norfolk. And I was serving in the legislature for 2 years when in 2007, I became the speaker of the legislature at the age of 30. And I served for 6 years as speaker of Nebraska's legislature. And the great thing about that position is that it gives you a front row seat to the issues that are shaping our state from every corner of our state, while at the same time representing an area that's part of the 1st Congressional District. As many of you know, I was running for governor in 2012. The night that I announced, my wife, and as she was going to bed, she said to me that she found a lump in her breast, and she ended up diagnosed with breast cancer. I got out of the race immediately, and I went back to building my business. And I really didn't ever think I'd come back to politics. But it turns out that everything's fine with Mandy. It's almost like it didn't happen. It's been so long ago. But what did happen was I went back to work and basically build a business where, you know, I'm in different parts of the state, and it's made me a better public servant. It's given me more perspective. I missed public service in 2020, and I ran for the legislature again after being out for 8 years. And when circumstances happened to our previous congressman, I decided that this was the right fit for me. What I'll tell you, and I'll be brief here, is I love the legislative branch of government. I thrive in a legislative role. There's a lot of people that get in the legislature with the intent to try and be in the executive branch. But I specifically chose to go back to the legislature because I like being one of a group where you have to use your advocacy skills and your communication skills and your interest in the issues to try and move people in a different direction. And that's what brings me to Congress. To the second part of your question is, you know, what have I been focused on? You know, as the new congressman for the 1st Congressional District, first and foremost, we have to take care of people that are calling in to handle Nebraskans' concerns. And I'm very proud to have hired Deb Shore, long-time Lancaster County Commissioner. She runs the Lincoln District office and is doing fantastic. I'm focused in a lot of issues in Lincoln, which I'm sure we can talk about later this morning. But yeah, I hope that gives you a little perspective on where I'm coming from.
And just a quick follow-up question off the script here. You mentioned starting your service in 2004 in the legislature. How have events and your experiences changed you as a politician, as a public servant from 2004 till now? Because it's a very different atmosphere now than it was.
Well, yeah, I'm trying to think back. You know, President George W. Bush was the president at the time I took office initially, and we've seen a lot of changes in the political landscape. I think that what's interesting about serving in a legislature is, yes, the political winds change and the environment is always changing. People might say that people might try to distinguish today from a different time, but we've had different influences in America, the Tea Party, the Democrats' Occupy movement, just the state issues have gone from the concern of sex offenders to tax reform to workforce development. At the end of the day, yes, the issues change, the winds change, but people are people. And when you're in a legislature, it's about your ability to work with other people. It's about your ability to connect, and it's about your ability to be an advocate. And if you start investing in the political winds, you're going to get where the political winds carry you. If you invest in relationships and build relationships and advocate for what you think is important, you can do your part to try and shape that conversation. And so I made it about relationships, but yeah, certainly we've seen a lot of changes.
You mentioned your ability to be an advocate. How in as polarized an atmosphere as this is, how do you be an advocate for everyone, because they're so far apart? Or can you be?
Yeah, you have to listen, do as much as you listening as you can. One of the things that you have to do as a member of Congress or as a member of a legislature is you have to put yourself in difficult situations where you are going to be challenged, where you are going to be questioned. And at the end of the day, I think what happens is that, people, first of all, there's communication, and you cannot stop communicating. And you have to do it in such a way, that people know that you're listening and that you want their opinion. And at the end of the day, ultimately, you have to press the button one way or the other. And all you can do is explain why you did it and do your best to try and represent as many Nebraskans as possible. I was in Lincoln, probably 2 weeks ago, and I ran into two folks that clearly were not going to vote for me. And we were on a sidewalk and we were visiting, and I just shared with them where I was on the issues, and they shared where they were on the issues, and I listened, and we talked about some of the votes that I took, and at the end of it, I think there was a mutual respect. That's my job to explain how I voted, and I don't think that anybody's mind was changed that day. But if that stops happening, that's bad for everybody. So I think part of it's putting out. That's why I've agreed to I did 2 debates. I did debates in June. Try to just answer people's questions and learn. There's a lot of issues I'm still learning about. Anybody doing this job is always going to be learning.
All right. Well, thanks, Mike. And the editorial board was advocates of debates, so we do appreciate your participation in those. We think those are valuable. All right. So getting into something a little bit more concrete, what in your mind are the key elements that our nation needs to pursue in terms of energy and environmental policies?
Well, thank you, first of all, for the question. I was alarmed, to say the least, when President Biden flew over to Saudi Arabia on bended knee to beg the oil barons to increase production to bring down gas prices. We were 10 years ago very close to being energy independent. In looking at the big picture, we have to have a balance. And that balance, of course, includes renewables. And I do support renewables. I've seen the impact that wind energy has had in areas of Northeast Nebraska, where, albeit we have more wind than a lot of different places in the country. I've seen the impact of solar, and I think they should be part of the conversation, but we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Our energy policy needs to be balanced. It needs to be nuclear. We still rely on coal. We still rely on, energy produced with the help of natural gas. All of that has to be there. The standard for me when it comes to our energy outlook is affordability and reliability. What we're seeing in Europe, I think, is a continent that's essentially doubled down on renewables. They're very vulnerable now that Vladimir Putin shut off the gas, and they're looking at their first major energy crisis. We have to have balance, which means a spectrum of all of the resources and add renewables in as we go. And when we had that 35 degrees below day 2 years ago, Nebraskans were well served because we had that mix. And I think as a member of the Southwest Power Pool, our power generators ended up making a lot of money that day for a lot of different reasons. But we had affordability and we had reliability, and we still have that today. And I don't want to compromise that.
All right, thank you. What international issues are your biggest concerns, and where do you stand on those?
Well, I'd say I have two. The first one is really top of mind, but the second one I think is a longer term threat. The first being the situation in Ukraine. I do support providing arms to Ukraine to allow the Ukrainians to defend themselves against the unjust and criminal actions of Vladimir Putin. I am concerned not only for the people of Ukraine, but for the stability of our of Europe. And I am very encouraged with the unity and the strength that we're seeing from NATO. I think it's really accelerated in the past year, and we are together working to keep and defend freedom. I think the instability caused by Vladimir Putin is rippling into every facet of, not only the world economy, but certainly touching ours. So I support arming the Ukrainians, and I am inspired by the leadership of President Zelensky and the progress that he's made and what he's been able to do to unite the world against Vladimir Putin. Long term, I'm concerned about China. I do think that the Chinese, the CCP in China wakes up every single day working to dismantle and harm the United States. Just one issue of many, I am very concerned about the use of Chinese spyware on cell towers in Nebraska, right outside of Offutt Air Force Base, near all of our missile silos. I'm concerned about China buying up U.S. farmland. They are working on a multifaceted plan to hurt American interests every single day. And I'm concerned about what they're doing with their Navy. I am someone that will work very hard to call these things out and to push, in one case, the Commerce Department to investigate the use of spyware on these cell towers in Nebraska.
All right, I could make a guess on your answer on this next question, but I'll ask it anyway. Are you concerned about the national debt, and what measures should we take as a nation to control it?
Well, I am concerned about the national debt, and I will tell you the people I talk to in the 1st Congressional District, regardless of their party, are concerned about the national debt. More importantly, people right now, and I think rightfully so, are tying a direct link between all of the government spending that we've seen in the last, since Joe Biden became president, to the inflation and the gas prices and the grocery prices and the supply chain issues and all of the things that have made life more expensive for Americans. And one of the questions, this is a great question because what would I do? Well, what have I done is a better way to answer it. I have voted against what I call the Inflation Expansion Act from President Biden that spent another $500 billion on lots of different programs relating to renewable energy. It's tone deaf. Like, even folks of the other party, other Democrats will say to me, I don't know where the money's coming from. And the reality is that as a member of Congress, you have to cast votes every day on what spending should look like. And that means for me, even though it is a great soundbite for people that are on the other side of me, I have to vote no on a lot of issues where we have this institutional spending. There's temporary one-time spending, and then there's making changes in federal policy that build billions of dollars into some kind of ongoing program. And so every time I vote, I make sure that I understand what the fiscal implications of the bill are. And that doesn't mean I vote no on everything. I did vote for the National Defense Authorization Act. I did that for national security reasons. There's also $300 million in there to rebuild Offutt after the flooding. And so I don't want to give people the impression that I'm just automatically going to vote no on every single. I do look at each bill. I look at the fiscal implications. And when I see ongoing spending that's built into some kind of a base where we lose track of it, I am very careful. I think that's what you have to do as a member of Congress. In Nebraska, this is a great story. And I think Nebraskans will appreciate this. When I was speaker and Dave Heineman was the governor, we were working on closing $1 billion budget hole back in 2010. I literally went down to the governor's office with my calculator, which was one of those tape machines, and I set it up on the opposite side of the governor, and we were at an impasse on a number of issues, and we literally balanced the budget shortfall and the state budget by making decisions on what we could actually afford. Now, I don't want to compare our state budget to the federal budget. There's two very different animals there, but I have experience in making choices on what spending should be. And I use that experience in Congress. And sometimes it means you vote against something that people read the headline and they're like, why did he do that? And the reality is, most likely, I looked at the fiscal impact and we can't afford it. So that's what I'm doing about it. And that's what I did in the legislature. So that's my perspective on that.
All right, well, Mike, I have one last question that I have to ask at the end, but this is typically where Kent jumps in. And he'll lean forward, get his cat out of his way if he needs to, and ask some probing questions. So Kent, don't let me down, buddy.
There's a lot of drama to this.
Yes. It appears to me that from proving that I'm very old, when I was back on Ed Zirinsky's staff back in the 70s in Washington, it was far less hyper partisan. And how do you break away from that? The direct, every vote seems to be party line, party line, party line. How can you break away from that now, and how do you do it?
That's a good question. So I have accepted invitations to almost everything that I've been invited to because I'm new and I'm trying to meet as many people as possible. So I started going to a bipartisan prayer breakfast every Thursday at 8 a.m. It's in the U.S. Capitol, and it's Republicans and Democrats, and we hear from one of our colleagues. And one of the interesting things is that a lot of times we'll have people from foreign countries. We've had a lot of Ukrainians that leave from their parliament, and it's a chance just to meet people. One of the things that I think really helps is that when members of Congress, as part of their committee work, will travel, there's a rule that they travel in a bipartisan way when they're learning about whatever issue it is. I think it's spending time with people, quite honestly, and talking to people. I've been there since July 12th, so I'm no expert, but I have sat on several committees with obviously Democratic chair and Democratic ranking members, and they treat me with respect, and I treat them with respect and respect the fact that they're there. And so I think it goes by just every day getting up and doing things like that. But I will tell you, we have, one of the things I've said in the debates is that, my opponent and I have very different views on a lot of the issues, but I respect her. I've worked with her in the legislature for 2 years. I love America. I know she loves America. I know that she wants to do right by people, and so do I. We have different opinions on the issues, but it doesn't mean I can't acknowledge the fact that she has my respect. She's raised a beautiful family, and she's been a voice in her community for a long time. And I think it's important for people to hear that, because the narrative is often different. There are differences on issues, and yes, that conflict is built into our system. But thank goodness we have the ability to have these discussions at the end of the day. And, you know, I had a reputation in the legislature, and I still do, with bringing people together and on difficult issues, which means making it about the issues and not about the person.
Last week, I believe, or the week before, the Election Count Act, or whatever it was called, appears to have, if it hasn't completely passed, it will. Is there other things that you think need to be addressed regarding voting rights, elections, security, those kind of issues that have, been raised in the last, I guess it'd be all 2 years now, that really seem to be divisive and, tear the country apart in a sense?
Well, you can't serve in a legislature for 10 years without respecting the prerogative of the states. And what I see a lot in Washington is this idea that we're going to federalize elections. We are separate states in a union with a federal government that has limited powers, and the states retain significant rights. I want the state of Nebraska to determine what the right policies are in election law. And any effort to federalize elections is really concerning to me. And every one of these bills that comes out has this enhanced role for the federal government. Nebraskans need to decide who represents Nebraskans. That includes Nebraskans deciding who goes to Washington, because that's our representative. I do support the voter ID initiative that is currently pending before Nebraska voters. I don't think it's too much to ask people to have to show their identification to vote. And I also think that, there are a number of people that have concerns about our election system, and, voter ID enhances their confidence, my confidence, our confidence in the system. So, but I really reject this idea of federalizing elections. And I've seen a lot of that in the House of Representatives this year.
After the Dobbs decision, you talk about things going back to the states that has essentially put the abortion issue back in the states. Is there any federal legislation or federal policy that you would support regarding abortion?
Well, in 2011, I passed the nation's first, what I said, common sense restrictions on abortion, drawing the line at 20 weeks, except for the life and health of the mother. And what started in Nebraska, a lot of other states adopted. And ironically, now a lot of Americans are talking about the same thing. Like, I support common sense restrictions on abortion. And I also believe, after the Dobbs case, that there is a lot of value in having the conversation in Nebraska. We've already led the nation in having what I think is a common sense restriction. I think that next legislative session, there are going to be a number of bills introduced, and every bill in the Nebraska legislature, unlike Congress, gets a hearing, and there's going to be a lot of value in everybody coming together. I believe that, this is most appropriately handled in the state level. No question. Right now, there's nothing pending before Congress on the House side, so it'd be premature to say what what the language is. But when I was in the legislature on this very difficult issue, I worked on it until I got 44 out of 49 state senators to place a 20-week abortion ban. And I didn't get there by top down declaring what we were going to do. I worked with members of the legislature to get there. And so, I do the same thing. If this were something that the Congress was intent on passing, which I think it should be left to the states, I'd be engaged in the process, but I'd also try to find something that we could bring the most people together on.
Ken, you got one more, buddy. Then we
Well, I had
last
6 or 7 others, but what is your sort of ag policy priority? Given where we are, that's probably the most important thing that a member of Congress, Senate or House, should be dealing with for Nebraska, I would think.
Right. Well, the farm bill is coming back up next year, and I have been asking a lot of farmers and ranchers, hey, what are your top issues? The one that comes to the top, and I don't think it's being threatened right now, is that farmers are very supportive of our current crop insurance program, and they don't want to see any changes made to it. It's refreshing to talk to constituents that are pleased with the way a federal program is working, and they want to protect it in its current state. As a member of the Oversight and Reform Committee, I sat there during a hearing where Democrats from either coast were really pushing this idea that we needed to shut down confined animal feeding operations, otherwise known as feedlots. And I was listening as these Democrats on either side of the nation were really taking aim and didn't want, the kind of feedlots that we have in Nebraska because of the environmental. They claim the environmental dangers to our water and to methane release and all of that. And I thought to myself, I don't think there's any Nebraska Democrats that would even agree with this. This is a narrative being pushed by people on either coast that is completely ignoring the way we produce food in the United States. And no one's a better steward of the environment than the farmers and ranchers. So that's one of my priorities. I am fighting to keep atrazine as an option for farmers to use. Right now, the EPA is trying to address or attack that. And then the biggest issue for me, and it's the one I maybe have the most experience in as a small town attorney, I'm very focused on keeping the federal estate tax exemption in place. If that were to go away, it would be very difficult for farm families to pass on the farm to the next generation. There are a lot of farm families out there that they can't make that payment, and it would be impossible to keep the farm in the family. And so there's always a conversation about the federal tax exemption. 2 years ago, the Democrats were talking about taking that away. I think it's really important that it stays in place. And, I think it would have the biggest impact on agriculture if it went away.
Thanks.
All right. Well, Mike, the last question is an open-ended one to let you end on a high note. What didn't we ask you that we should have? Or what final point do you want to get to that we didn't attack?
Well, I guess I'd like to share some of the priorities I have that directly affect the city of Lincoln. I have been working with the university, just as Congressman Fortenberry had, to increase or to fund a USDA research center on the UNL Innovation Campus. This is the top priority of the University of Nebraska system. It's a partnership with the USDA. Congressman Fortenberry made a lot of progress on this, and I am working to maintain that progress. And I have been meeting with folks at UNL to really understand kind of where we are at right now. They're going to build a greenhouse, but the idea of bringing in these USDA researchers is a great move for the Innovation Campus, and that's one of my priorities. The other priority is the Lincoln Post Office. I know there's a conversation happening right now about where the convention center should go, and I will leave that up to the community leaders. But anybody that's looking at future growth in Lincoln knows that that post office, where it's at, could be used so much better to double down on the great environment that's already been created in the Haymarket. And I am working to thread the needle to try and figure out how we can work with the federal government, the Postal Service, to get the post office put in maybe at a different place, work with the distribution systems that are already in place in Eastern Nebraska with no impact to the mail. I don't want anybody to have any change, but I think that land use is so much better if the city of Lincoln and the community could decide what should go there. I'm really proud of what's happened in the Haymarket. I think it's fantastic. I really think that moving the post office out of there is a priority. And the other thing I'd say with our state's capital city is that we have in Lincoln this budding entrepreneurial system that the business community has helped foster that does not exist anywhere else in the state of Nebraska. And I have been a huge advocate of putting venture at-risk capital into Invest Nebraska. Well, I was on the board of that for several years. And I just strongly believe that we need to double down on this environment that we've created and use all of the things Lincoln has going to make it possible for people to start businesses, understanding that not every business succeeds, but there's benefit in starting businesses and building as much as many tech entrepreneurs as possible. I think a lot of times people don't realize in the state, and even people in Lincoln don't realize that Lincoln has created what a lot of towns want to create. And we just need to keep focusing on it and making sure they have the resources and building a system where some student at the University of Nebraska in the reg school feels like their shot at becoming successful happens right here, in Lincoln. And I think what's happening in Lincoln should be replicated across the state. And trust me, I've read lots of different books trying to figure out how you just create something like that. It doesn't happen like that. It happens organically. And Lincoln has these entrepreneurs that have built this, and we need to give this fire oxygen so that it just continues to grow. And that's what I'm kind of excited to be a part of, or I am excited to be a part of it.
All right. Well, with that, that seems like a kind of nice uplifting note to end on. So, Mike, thank you very much for the time you spent with the editorial board today, and we wish you the best.
All right. Thank you very much. Everybody have a good day.
Thanks, Mike.
You too.
Yep. See you back.